Nigeria is one of the United States' main African trading partners, a good friend and ally, and a major economic and political force beyond even the African continent. Unfortunately, it continues to be plagued by terrorist forces whose reach extends beyond the borders of that country. Today's hearing is intended to examine the extent to which the organization known as Boko Haram and its affiliates pose a threat to Nigeria and the region, as well as the United States and the rest of the international community. Boko Haram is a Nigerian terrorist organization whose name in Arabic means people committed to the propagation of the Prophet's teachings and jihad. The name Boko Haram is a translation meaning that conventional education, Boko, is forbidden because of its repeated attacks against Christian targets, especially during holy days such as Christmas and Easter. Boko Haram is seen by some as principally anti-Christian. In the last year alone, Boko Haram terrorists are believed to have killed some 1,200 Christians in Nigeria. In fact, it's estimated that 60% of Christians killed worldwide because of religious intolerance die in Nigeria. According to Mr. Manuel, this year alone, one of our witnesses who will be testifying shortly, 53 Christian churches have been attacked and 216 people have been murdered by terrorists in those churches. However, it would not be completely accurate interpretation of the facts to assume that what is happening in Nigeria is just a Muslim-Christian conflict. In the past 2 years, both of our subcommittees have sent staff delegations to investigate the Boko Haram threat, and this past September, Gregory Simpkins, our subcommittee staff director, and I visited Abuja and Jos to further look into this matter. We found that the truth of this organization is much more complex than is widely understood. Although exact numbers were not made available to us, Boko Haram is definitely targeting other Muslims who don't agree with their views. Muslim pastors who criticize the terrorist violence are themselves made targets. We were told by some that if an imam or some teacher in a mosque speaks out against Boko Haram on a Friday, he would be targeted for death on Saturday. What must be prevented is a growing inability for Christians and Muslims to work together to meet their common threat. And we found numerous examples, I should say, of cooperation between Christians and Muslim leaders to combat this killing spree by Boko Haram. According to various reports, Boko Haram began in 2003 when about 200 university students and unemployed youth created a camp in Yobe state near the Niger border to withdraw from what they considered the corrupt, sinful, and unjust Nigerian government, and their community was supposedly founded on Islamic law. The group was also known by the nickname the Nigerian Taliban. Violent clashes with Nigerian security forces destroyed the group several times, but its charismatic leader, Mohammed Yusuf, kept the group alive until his death while in police custody in July of 2009. Since Yusuf's death, there have been various spokesmen, but one person who is believed to be the nominal leader, Abubakar Shekau. Further, a breakaway group known as Ansaru has appeared on the scene. The proliferation of voices speaking for Boko Haram and the new faction leads some to believe that this is not a coherent organization. We learned that it is actually a very sophisticated organization operating in cells disconnected from each other, but coordinating at a high level. While there are some acting in the name of Boko Haram for their own purposes, this terrorist group is organized, albeit in an unconventional manner. Some also believe that this group is purely a domestic terrorist group operating in Nigeria. We found that to be a false assumption as well. Boko Haram and Ansaru does wage attacks on the Nigerian government and other domestic targets. Nevertheless, their actions prove their participation in the global jihad movement that wages violent war worldwide to establish their skewed version of Islam as the prevailing religion globally. Various actions, such as the bombing of the United Nations office in Abuja in August of 2011, and numerous statements from Boko Haram spokesmen indicate their international intent. This international focus has been confirmed by both American and Nigerian intelligence information. The three criteria for an organization to be declared a foreign terrorist organization by the U.S. government are: 1, it must be a foreign organization; 2, engage in terrorist activity and must threaten the security of the United States nationals, U.S. national security, or the economic interests of the United States. Clearly, Boko Haram and Ansaru meets that test, and we do welcome the news that will be announced or was announced earlier today. I have introduced H.R. 3209, which urged the administration to declare Boko Haram a foreign terrorist organization. This measure would provide tools for stopping those who currently provide funding to others for others in their murderous terrorist organization that they run. And again, we welcome the State Department's statement today that they will declare Boko Haram an FTO. Our government has provided training and other assistance to the Nigerian government to battle this terrorist threat. Unfortunately, the past brutally demonstrated by the Nigerian security forces, as well as the inability of Nigerian security forces to collaborate with one another, have prevented their effort from being as successful as it should be. In far too many cases, the Nigerian government itself has actually turned local people in the north against its effort to end the terrorist threat. By that ineffectiveness, the Nigerian security forces have pushed Nigerian Christians and Muslims to form their own militias to protect themselves from terrorists and each other. In the long run, this development makes eventual reconciliation of Nigeria's various religious and ethnic communities even more difficult. We have with us today the administration's point person for our government's effort to help end the terrorist threats in Nigeria, a leading Nigerian Muslim spokesman against this terrorism, a Nigerian Christian expert on this terrorist threat, and an American-based expert on this violence, and a survivor of the Boko Haram threat that Greg and I met when we were in Jos. This survivor, Mr. Adamu, was challenged to renounce his Christian faith. When he refused, he was shot right through the mouth, right through the lower part of his face, and left for dead, bleeding. Miraculously, he survived and joins us today with one of the most inspiring examples of faith, because he was told, renounce your faith and you will live. If you don't, you will die. And so a man that has unbelievable courage as well as faith. He says, I have a message to everyone that will hear my story. Do everything that you can to end this ruthless religious persecution in northern Nigeria. I'd like to now yield to Ms. Bass for any opening comments you might have.